Welcome students. Today we are continuing from part 2. If you haven't seen part 2, check out the link in the description down below. Today's video, we will cover part 3, which is talking about evolution and diversity of life. There will be multiple videos about EmSAT past papers. Make sure to subscribe to receive the next part of this past paper by turning on the notification bell to be notified whenever I upload a new video. Let's start answering these questions. First question. Terrestrial snakes and aquatic eels have a similar elongated morphology. That means they look like each other, as it's clear. However, they are not closely related evolutionarily. This is a very important statement. Their resemblance is an example of analogy, homology, divergent evolution, or speciation. If we just focus on the question, they mention that they are not closely related evolutionarily. What does that mean? That the both choices C and D are wrong. Why? What is divergent evolution? This happened when we have two species derived because they split it from one population because of geographical barriers. So this is wrong. What is a speciation? Creating a new species from the same species. So they are related. That means choice D is wrong. Moving to A and B, analogy and homology. Actually, this is related to the structure. Analogous structure and homologous structure. What is the difference? Analogous structure, the two different structures, they look like each other, but they perform different functions. What about homologous structure? They don't look like each other, but they perform the same function. So if we look at the examples that we have we will find that the terrestrial snakes crawling on the ground and the eels swimming, so different functions. That means the right choice here is A, analogy. Second question. Scientists collected and aligned the molecular data below to analyze the relationship of whales to 6 other mammals. Which mammal is closest to whale? What do we mean by closest? That means the most animal or the mammal that shared many traits with whales. Before looking at the data, let's see the key here. Plus means the sequence of DNA for certain trait is present. Minus means absent. Question mark means undetermined. So we are looking for what? For the plus here. Do they share it or not? So we will focus on where and start comparing. Well, the first one, the first sequence, nothing shared with anyone. The second, the same. The third sequence, it's shared only with hippo. Fourth, it's shared only with hippo. Fifth, it's shared only with hippo. Don't judge right now. Let's continue, then we can give the right answer. 6 sequence, it's already missed. 7, undetermined, moving to 8, with hippo and others. 9, with hippo and others. 10, nothing. 11, nothing. 12, with hippo and others. 13, nothing. So the most or the closest mammal that shared many traits, I think it's hippo. So the right answer here is D. Question 3. Characteristics of mammals but not of birds include which of the following? This is very easy. 1. Feathers, sure birds. 2. Giving birth to live young, sure mammals. 3. 4-chambered heart. Both of them, they have 4-chambered heart. So what is the right choice? Once they said, but not of birds, so we'll look for the trait that is talking about giving birth. I mean the choice. A, 1 only? No. B, 1 and 2? No. C, 2 only? That's it, the right choice. No need to go for D. So the right choice here is C. Let's read this question. An ecosystem undergoes a sudden drastic change that now favors organisms with an extreme phenotype. First of all, my advice, please look for certain terms. For example, sudden drastic change and extreme phenotype. What do you mean by phenotype? The appearance, the traits that makes the appearance of organism. This is an example of, okay, we have 4 choices. Actually, you should know each choice means what. Genetic drift. That means random fluctuations in the numbers of gene variants in a population. So it's not the extreme phenotype. Move on. Founder effect. Founder effect refers to the reduction in genomic variability that occurs when a small group of individuals becomes separated from a large population. So this choice also is wrong. Moving on. Directional selection. What is a directional selection? We all know it's a type of natural selection in which the phenotype of the species tend toward one extreme, as we see here. I think this is the right, but let's go for D also. Bottleneck effect. What is a bottleneck effect? The way in which a reduction and subsequent increase in a population size affects the distribution of genetic variations among its individuals. So it's not related here to the sudden change and giving extreme phenotype. So let's go back to the directional selection, which is the force of nature, I mean the natural selection, that causes a population to evolve towards one end, as we see here in this graph, of a trait spectrum. So the right answer should be here, C, the directional selection. Let's see this question. The image below shows the structures of limbs in different mammals. As we see, we have for a human, cheetah, whale, bat. Something fly, something swimming on the ground like animals, and a human. All the structures shown have. Listen, before reading even the choices, it's a common figure. This image, if you learned evolution, you saw this before. It's a huge example of having same structures of bone. Look at how the bone's structured, but different functions. Okay, so we are talking here about homologous structure. Let's read the options. Different origin and functions. Actually, it's clear that they derived from a common ancestor. B, different origin but similar functions. Both statements, the first one and the second, are wrong. No similar function and they derive from common ancestor. C, same origin, makes sense, and same function, that's wrong. Moving to D, same origin, we agree on this, but different functions, we agree on this also. So the right choice here should be D. Let's read this question. When single-stranded DNA from a human is mixed with single-stranded DNA from a chimpanzee, we find that about 99% of the DNA is homologous. What does that mean? The sequence of certain traits, they look like each other. This can be taken as evidence that looking like each other does not mean derived from or evolved from. Let's go for choice A. Humans and chimpanzees originated in similar environments? Sure not. B, humans evolved from chimpanzees? If this is right, why still we have chimpanzees in this life? Ignore it. C, chimpanzees evolved from humans? We disagree 100%. Let's be scientific. Humans and chimpanzees are closely related? That's right. What do we mean by closely related? We shared some traits sequences in DNA the same, but keep in your mind, once you studied genetics and evolution, that we have difference in the proportions. If you are aiming to analyze it, different proportions of nucleotides, and add to that different number of chromosomes. That's why we are totally different organisms, despite we are closely related in the sequence of DNA. So the right answer should be here what? D. Let's see this question. Bird guides once listed the myrtle warbler and the Audubon's warbler as a distinct species. This is at the beginning, different species, but applying the biological species concepts, recent books show them as eastern and western forms of a single species. They look like each other. Just look at them and try to compare. The rumped warbler. Now, experts must have found that the two kinds of warblers, what? How they are looking like each other in this way. Choice A, live in the same area. Actually, in the question they told you eastern and western, how they are in the same area. So this is wrong. Look enough alike to be considered one species. We know that, and this is our question, but why? Why they considered them as a single species? C, are reproductively isolated from each other. If they look like each other, how they are isolated, how they are not reproduced. Let's go for D, successfully interbreed in nature. That makes sense. That's why they are looking like each other, despite the differences in geographical areas. So the right answer here is D. Let's see this question. In a small group of people living in a remote area, there is a high incidence of a blue skin, a condition that results from a variation of the structure of hemoglobin. Actually, in this case, we call it cyanosis. This is because of the depletion of oxygen level inside the blood. All of the blue-skinned residents can trace their ancestry to one couple who were among the original settlers of this region. Okay, the unusually high frequency of blue skin in the area is an example of. Actually, the unusually high frequency, it's a part of the definition of certain terms we discussed before. But let's go through each choice. The first one, sexual selection, which is a mode of natural selection in which members of one biological sex choose mates of the other sex. It's not related. B, natural selection, we all know, it's the process through which populations of living organisms adapt and change according to the changes of the environment. But this is not related. C, mutation. Mutation, it's a change in the structure of gene of the DNA or a chromosomal mutation. So let's go for genetic drift. What is a genetic drift? A genetic drift is a mechanism of evolution characterized by random fluctuations of what? In the frequency, and please connect it with your question, of a particular version of a gene or allele in a population. So the right answer here is what? The genetic drift, D. Let's see this question about Darwin. Which of the following statements is not one of the principal observations upon which Darwin based his theory of natural selection? A, the population size of a species would increase exponentially if all individuals that were born reproduced successfully, and this statement is 100% right and related to natural selection. B, populations tend to remain stable in size aside from seasonal fluctuations. Sure, natural selection, that means the environment will affect and the seasons will affect the stability of the population size. So this is also right. C, environmental resources are limited, 100% right. There's nothing called unlimited. Okay, so still A, B, and C under natural selection. Let's move to D. Most of the variation observed among individuals in a population is due to environmental causes. It's okay. Thus, very little variation is heritable. How come? How they will pass it? They should pass it from one generation to another. So I think, and you should believe in, that choice D is the wrong choice. That means it's not one of the principal observations of Darwin's theory of natural selection. So the right answer is D. Now this question. A small isolated population found on a remote island is more likely to undergo speciation than a large widespread population because it's small. That's right. All the time, the small populations easily to be affected with changes and environmental changes. Isolated population, let's see the choices. The first one, isolated population is more likely to migrate to other islands or the nearest mainland. No need to talk about this point because why they will migrate? They did not mention they are under certain pressure there. So I doubt this is the right answer. B is more readily adaptable to extreme environmental changes. Sure not, because they have a small number and easily to be affected to pass their traits to their offspring. C contains much greater genetic diversity. This is against what the scientists said, because the small populations tend to lose genetic diversity more quickly than large populations. So this is 100% wrong. D is more susceptible to genetic drift, and this is right. And we know what is genetic drift, and we explained it before. So the right answer here is D. Let's see this question. The maggot fly is native to North America and originally fed on a fruit of the wild hawthorn. Since the mid-1800s, a population of flies has emerged that instead feed on apples. Maggot flies typically mate on or near the fruit of their host plants. Many varieties of apples ripen 3 to 4 weeks before the hawthorn fruits do. So by default, it will affect the fly. Now, the different fruit preferences of the two fly populations will most likely have which of the following effects. So we want to see how that affects these populations of flies. A. The ability to survive on a diet of two different fruits will help the flies learn to eat many more types of fruit. It's not related at all, so this is wrong really. B. The flies that eat hawthorn fruit will lay some of their eggs on the earlier ripening apples to minimize competition among the larvae. No, how they will make it earlier and how they compared this. They have a fixed time for maturation. That's wrong. C. The hawthorn plants will decrease in number since the number of pollinators is less. It's okay, but here we are not studying the impact of flies on the fruit. We are looking for the impact of eating different types of fruits on flies. So this is wrong. D. The single fly species will evolve into two distinct species because of the lack of gene flow between the two populations. This makes sense. What do you mean by gene flow? We all know that gene flow is the transfer of genetic material from one population to another. But by this way, the maturation, the difference in the timing between eating the wild hawthorn and the apples will make them two distinct populations. So the right answer here is D. Now, mitochondria are found in most eukaryotic cells and contain their own DNA and ribosomes that are similar to those typical of many prokaryotic cells. So we want to relate prokaryote to eukaryote. Which of the following statements is justified by these observations? A. Mitochondrial DNA ensures a faster way of producing enzymes. Okay, the statement is right, but it's not related for what we need. B. The mitochondrion is the only location in which eukaryotic cells can synthesize ATP. Yes, but again, it's not demand. What we want is not to talk about mitochondrion itself. C. Mitochondrial membranes provide abundant surface area for reactions because of the enfolding called crusture. That's right. This is talking about the structure of mitochondria. But here we are looking to relate between eukaryotic and prokaryote. Let's go for D. An ancestral cell most likely engulfed an aerobic prokaryote in a relationship that proved beneficial for both cells. They mean prokaryote and the ancestral one. Eukaryote. Look at this. Ancestral prokaryote engulfing happens not only for the mitochondrium, also for a chloroplast, and it's a theory. No, this is ancestral eukaryote. So it's a relation between prokaryote and eukaryote. This, if you took it, hopefully you studied this, the endosymbiotic theory that states the mitochondria and the chloroplast in eukaryotic cells were once aerobic bacteria that were ingested by a large anaerobic bacteria, prokaryotes. So the theory explains the origin of eukaryotic. In all means, D choice is explaining the relationship between eukaryotic and prokaryotic. So D is the right answer. Going back to Darwin's, which of the following ideas is not part of Darwin's concept of evolution? Let's read the choices. A. Individuals in a population are genetically identical. 100% wrong. I think this is the right answer because evolution is change over time. If we did not change the traits, how it's genetically identical? But let's read the other choices. B. A struggle for existence exists among individuals of a population. That's right. Sure, they are struggling because of the changes, because of the limited resources. So B is right also. B is right not as an answer, but it's right as a concept of evolution. C. Individuals that are best adapted to their environment are more likely to survive and reproduce. This is clear. This is adaptation theory of Darwin's. Also, it's a right concept. D. A population is capable of producing more offspring than the environment can support. 100% right. And we should remember the carrying capacity. So also this is supporting the idea of evolution. So let's go back and choose the choice A, which is the right answer. This question. I like the question with tables and graph and figures. Hemoglobin is a protein found in blood. It is used in the study of evolutionary relationships because most animals have this protein, given the information in the figure below. What type of evolutionary evidence is shown in the figure? Actually, we have different species and the sequence of amino acids for each one, so we are relating them, how we can compare between them. Let's read the choices. A. Comparative biochemistry. Without hesitation, this is the right answer. This is chemical things. So it's a comparative. The comparison depends on chemistry. But let's read the rest to explain it. B. Comparative embryology. There's nothing here displayed talking about comparing the embryos of these species. So it's not. C. Homologous structure. Again, as you see, it's not talking about the skeletal system of these organisms. So it's not. D. Geographic distribution. They did not show where all these organisms live to compare. So also it's wrong. So we'll go back again to A, which is comparative biochemistry as an evidence talking about the same mechanism for trapping and transforming energy for building proteins from amino acids. So the right choice here, sure, is A. Now we reach the last question of this part. During microevolution, a or an blank will become more or less common within a population. Simply, let's exclude A and D choices. Why? Species is not related to be more or less, and even mutation change in DNA. Microevolution related to alleles, and alleles are different form of genes. So if we want to define microevolution, it's a change in allele frequencies that later on becoming more common in the population. So the right answer here is C, which is alleles. This concludes the third part of our EmSAT paper. We have covered evolution and diversity of life. Next video, we will answer more questions on part 4, which is about ecology, interdependence, energy, and dynamics. Make sure you like and subscribe and turn on the notification bell to receive more videos from Mrs. Biology. Thanks for watching.